Let's speak more about the elections in Nigeria now with Afolabi Adekaiyaoja, who is a research analyst with the Center for Democracy and Development, live for us in Abuja tonight. Good to see you again, Afolabi. We spoke to you last week. Where do things stand with vote counting 24 hours since the election?
It was earlier this week, but then it shows how long time has been since we last spoke. So we're expecting the collation room for the Independent National Electoral Commission to open in a couple of minutes. It was actually meant to be at 6 p.m. our time, but then we think that there's been a bit of a delay. Vote counting already began. So for the Constitution, about the Electoral Act, once the polls close and the last person on the queue has voted, then the collation and the counting can start. And we are seeing trickles of results coming out from different parts of the country. There are different results that are unprecedented. There are some that are quite expected. But then one of the big issues that we're looking at is really in the polling units where there have been some unfortunate discrepancies. So we're actively trying to see to monitor to see if this matches with our observer reports. So all in all, we've been able to get some good results and some good feedback in terms of the way the bimodal voter accreditation system was used. So that was meant to be a big game changer in terms of only ensuring that people who are registered and accredited to vote could vote. Right now we're seeing, and our reporters have reported, a very, very mass acceptance and usage of that particular device. Now what is quite telling is in the areas where either due to logistical issues or security challenges that polls were not able to get conducted, and that's one thing that we're quite concerned about. Yesterday, the CDD issued a statement calling on INEC to extend voting into today to allow those particular polling units to get their chance to vote. And we know that in Bayelsa, for example, 141 polling units were allowed to conduct their votes today. So now what we are really doing is waiting for those to start coming in. We expect that there will likely be a declaration between Tuesday and Wednesday, but this is partly because we've been able to see quite an uptick in results that are uploaded onto the independent results, INEC results viewing portal on IREV. But then there's still a long way to go. There's still a long time to go, and we know that this is likely going to be a very long wait, but a very important wait for us.
So have the problems then picked up in the last few hours, be it the delays in people voting in 5 states where I understand people were only able to vote at around 6 p.m. last night? In the capital, there was the issue of armed men who apparently fired into the air near a voting station, which then had people frazzled, reports of ballot boxes being snatched and the rest of it. Has there been enough of these incidents to possibly dent the credibility of the election outcome?
So there have been many of these issues, there have been many of these incidents, and unfortunately this has become quite rife. So we are looking at unsubstantiated but extensive reports about insecurity issues, not even just in the area that you mentioned, but also in other states in the country. The one that has been much more particular is the Lagos State, the commercial capital, where there have been reports of even whole polling units having been burnt down. But the challenge here is that in terms of the logistics and the way that the election is conducted, this is really a very mass intergovernmental approach. So INEC is in charge of ensuring that the elections are conducted and making sure that the logistics is arranged. But then there are many security agencies which were responsible for really making sure that the polls were secure and that voters could go easily and know that they were voting without any stress or without any concern about the loss of life. The fact that we have had many of these issues is actually something that's really appalling, and we are calling on INEC to do some more investigation to ensure that this doesn't repeat itself in the governorship election, which takes place in 2 weeks' time. Ultimately, however, we don't think that it is something that will likely lead to a damage in the credibility of the results. This is because the process itself has been designed to be quite foolproof. But ultimately, really where the concern comes in is ensuring that where there were delays and where there were regrettable avoidances, that INEC allows those polling units to conduct the elections. The elections still get taking place and people don't get unintentionally disenfranchised. It's really important to stress that, because that is really something that is at the heart of any democracy. One of our big concerns, however, is also looking at the legislation in terms of the rules concerning the margin of lead principle. So what this means is that if a polling unit is cancelled, even if a local government area, depending on the election, and the number of registered voters in that particular unit is less of the margin between the established leaders, then the resolution still gets called, because the assumption is that even if everybody goes in a different direction, it won't change the outcome. However, we are still concerned because ultimately, you don't want a situation where you are not allowed to vote or to even speak your voice, which is really at the heart again of any democracy. So we're monitoring to see where any of these discrepancies took place. Is there any polling units that were outright cancelled, and the plans by the commission to ensure that it's carried out subsequently.
And do we expect there to be any consequences, any punishment for the people responsible for the disruptions, be they at electoral commission level, be they at the level of these armed men who are firing into the air and allegedly snatching ballot boxes?
Well, the unfortunate reality of our ever-growing but still quite, young democracy is that there are so many of these issues that are in play, and there are different institutions that are really playing a very big part. Part of the challenge becomes how could a group or an individual have the wherewithal and the courage to even carry out such a heinous act on election day in the first place. This usually means that there is, on some level, some part of a particular group of this large election ecosystem that was compromised to even allow such a thing happen. Now, what we are actively looking at, especially with other stakeholders in the civil society space, and with other well-meaning Nigerians, is really to get some more information and to see how this can be readily carried out. What we do know is that in a situation where information and where individuals are actively pointed and that there's clear information about people who are involved or who are actively behind these attacks, that there's legislation to ensure that they are fully sanctioned and that they are punished to the extent of the law. Now, the problem is really getting to this position, and the reality is really about how many of these groups might be tied to, non-state actors, or even to political groups that might be trying to circumvent or affect the outcome of the election. The bright side of the entire process really has been the fact that millions of Nigerians, especially young Nigerians, have come out emphatically to vote. They've defied the odds, they've defied the weather, they've defied different challenges to be able to ensure that their voices are heard and that they were able to take part in the election. And we are quite optimistic that at the end of the day, this resounding mandate, this resounding interest in civic engagement will not just play a very big part in shaping the voice of the coming, elected officials, but also the future of the country. We're hoping that this momentum can still carry on in terms of ensuring that the leaders who are elected are held to account, and if possible, if necessary, they are also removed at the next shot of the ballot. Also ensuring that in future elections, because of different off-cycle elections, Nigeria holds a governorship election every year, and there will be 3 in November. So making sure that going forward, we don't just rest on the relatively successful outcome of many Nigerians getting involved to vote. Is really about making sure that this engagement goes beyond just 4-year cycle, making sure that at any given stage, any leader, anyone is aware that if they go against the mandate that they have been given by the people can also take it back.
Afolabi Adekaiyaoja, good to speak to you as always. Research analyst for the Center for Democracy and Development, speaking to us from Abuja, Nigeria.